moved, how God moved them and delivered them out of Egypt and into the promised land. Last Sunday night we started talking about how there was some that remained on the east side of the Jordan River. We're going to look at that, if you will. Turn back to Joshua chapter 1, as well as we're going to be looking at a couple other things. We'll be turning over also to Numbers. Is that the right book?
Or Deuteronomy.
Or Deuteronomy. Numbers.
Are you sure?
Chapter 32. Yes. Sunday night I was like really confused. And I am all the time. I just better do a better job of hiding it sometimes. But Sunday night I couldn't hide it at all. And so in Joshua chapter 1, we won't spend a lot of time right here. But just to remind us again, Joshua chapter 1, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given unto you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, I have my glasses back there, even unto the great river and the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and of the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. So we have the promise of this land. This we often refer to as the promised land. And we have the promise of this land that God's going to deliver to them. Yes, thank you, Rebecca. And there's a notepad laying there. They might even be laying on it. Bring me that notepad. It's got a bunch of stuff wrote on it. Bring me that too. Ron said we was going to get out early. It's nothing to do with this, I promise you. It's a name that I wanted to share with you in prayer, and I didn't have it with me. Well, I'll do it later, but I'm going to share this name with you if I can. But back in Numbers chapter 32, if you want to turn back there again, I just want to read you Joshua chapter 1 to kind of remind you what's going on here. Moses has been now buried by God Almighty, and then on the heels of that, God has empowered Joshua now to lead the children of Israel. We know that God is leading the children of Israel, allowing Joshua to be used in that way. All righty, good. We got plenty of notes now. And that's not the one. This is one of these will be the one, I hope. And I just wanted to share something with you. I'll do that in just a second. But we find ourselves knowing often parts of the Scripture, but there's some interesting things I wanted us to glean from this. In Numbers chapter 32, the Bible says in verse 1, Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of cattle, and when they saw the land of Jazar and the land of Gilead, that behold, the place was a place for cattle. So we talked about this on Sunday night, how God, how they petitioned and asked if they could remain there on the east side of the Jordan, the side of the sun rising. So we have this story here where they had much cattle. These tribes have much cattle, and they seen it's a great place for cattle. So it says in chapter 32, verse 2, the children of Gad, the children of Reuben, came and spake unto Moses and Eleazar the priest, and unto the prince of the congregation, saying, verse 4, even the country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel, and the land is a land for cattle. And thy servants have cattle. Wherefore say they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over Jordan. So Moses is still alive at this time, and they're petitioning Moses, asking him, we have a lot of cattle.
You either turn the mic on or don't.
Better. So they said, we have a lot of cattle. This is a great place for cattle. And God's already given victory over this area. We're living here in peace, and so what? Can we just stay here? Lord, if it please you, Moses, can you give us the permission to remain here? And the Bible says in chapter 32, verse 6, And Moses said to the children of Gad and the children of Reuben, Shall your brethren go to war, and shall ye sit here? So basically, we talked about this Sunday night. I'll go through just a reminder. He says, so you're wanting to take this land because you know there's going to be battles there. So you just don't want to fight the battles. You're wanting, and he gives a long exhortation here about warning them about just sitting around and not doing anything. God has told us there's battles to fight, and you're wanting to just go ahead and take this land because you're already here and not go there. Basically, they came into agreement with Moses and told Moses, no, we will go fight. And that's what they said. We'll go and fight the battles. Our men, we'll build houses and cities and walls, and we'll put our cattle up and our wives and our children, and we'll house them safely. And us men, we'll go with you. Matter of fact, it even says that they went before them. They led the way. They said, we're going across the Jordan with you to fight the battle, but when we're done fighting, can we come back to our families here on this side? Now, the reality is some of them knew that they may not come back from the battle is not always a guarantee. Some of them may not come back. But they believed God was going to deliver them, so they said, can we? And basically Moses, and they came into agreement, and Moses said, okay, you can stay here. And it wasn't just these two tribes. There was another part of a tribe there. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. Turn, if you will, back to the book of Joshua now. I just want to catch you up where we were. In Joshua chapter 22. In Joshua chapter 22, we're going to read just 4 or 5 verses here. And we're going to look see what's happening. In chapter 22, Joshua chapter 22, verse 30, and when Phinehas the priest and the princes of the congregation and the heads of the thousands of Israel, which were with him, heard the words the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the children of Manasseh spake, it pleased them. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar, the priest, said unto the children of Reuben, and to the children of Gad, and to the children of Manasseh, this day we perceive that the Lord is among us, because ye have not committed this trespass against the Lord. Now ye have delivered the children of Israel out of the hand of the Lord. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the princes returned from the children of Reuben, and from the children of Gad, out of the land of Gilead, unto the land of Canaan, to the children of Israel, and brought them word again. And the thing pleased the children of Israel, and the children of Israel blessed God, and did not intend to go up against them in battle to destroy the land where the children of Reuben and Gad dwelt. And the children of Reuben and the children of Gad called, notice this, the altar Ed, for it shall be a witness against us that the Lord is God. One of the things I want us to look at real quickly is we see how Moses, they approached Moses and they said, can we stay here? We have a lot of cattle. This is a great place for cattle. We'll build cities, and we'll house our wives and children. We'll go to battle, and we'll come back and dwell here on this side of the Jordan. And Moses basically said, okay, we can do that. But here we have the story here in Numbers chapter 22. We won't go through it in great detail. We'll look at it again at a later date. But we've had this. The Bible says, and Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest, verse 32, and the princes returned from the children of Reuben and from the children of Gad, out of the land of Gilead unto the land of Canaan, to the children of Israel, and brought them word again. And the thing pleased the children of Israel. And the children of Israel blessed God, and did not intend to go up against them in battle, to destroy the land wherein the children of Reuben and Gad dwelt. And the children of Reuben and the children of Gad called the altar Ed, for it shall be a witness between us that the Lord is God. Here's the thing about it. I'm going to ask you, we're going to rehearse a couple things real quickly, just to kind of set a stage. Are you familiar? Do you remember the familiarity with the tabernacle in the wilderness and the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant? You remember that, how God established a tabernacle so that they could come in place, the high priest could go before the Lord and get forgiveness. And behind the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized the presence of God. You remember, and we don't have time to go through this tonight, but just to kind of remind us, remember when they were getting ready to cross the Jordan River? How God caused the water to stop flowing in the Jordan? You remember that? Mm-hmm. There were 4 priests that were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And God told them, by the way, the Jordan was in time of flooding, the Bible says, and God told them, here's what I want you to do. I want you 4 priests, to step into the river. And at the moment when the last foot of the last priest steps into the river, then God says basically he's going to stop the flow of the Jordan, and all the water from that point will flow downward, and the rest of this water will heap upward. So he's going to stop the flow, he's going to dam it up essentially. All right? And by doing that, he's going to stop the flow of the Jordan, and they're going to be able to cross over on dry ground. Now, when they crossed over on dry ground, they crossed over, and then they got to the other side, and they built 2 altars. Remember, there was 2 altars. There was one built in the middle of Jordan, in the midst of the Jordan, and there was one built on the other side of the Jordan. Right. And in doing so, those altars, that one on the other side of Jordan was built there as a remembrance to the future generations. So when your children ask what this means, you have a story to tell them that this is remembering that God delivered us. But we now find that on the other side of Jordan, there's still 2.5 tribes remaining back there. Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. So as a result, now the priest has come and met with them, and the agreement's been discussed. They go over to the children of Israel, and they declare, here's what's going to happen. And they said, okay, if they're not going to go over here, that's fine. They'll still be, we won't go to war with them. We're not going to battle with them. They can have that land. That's part of their inheritance. We'll take, remember that's the agreement they made with Moses. You can take the other 9.5 tribes and divide them among those 9.5 tribes. Just let us have this. And basically now we have the news here in chapter 22 of Joshua that they're agreeing on that. Both sides are agreeing. That's fine. But we have now the story, we don't have time to go into it, that they're setting up on the east side of Jordan, and they're going to remain there and live there. And they're going to build an altar there. And they're going to worship and bless the Lord pertaining to that altar. How many of you is cold? I've seen a couple people look like they were cold. Julien's cold all the time.
Yeah.
Jacob, or what's your name? Rebecca. Bump that button up one so that air conditioner turns off. Because I hear it running, I know that's going to make it worse. How's that? And all right. First time for everything, right? And so what it boils down to is this. They're going to live there, and they're going to remain there. The other 9.5 tribes are going to go across the Jordan, and they're going to enter into the promised land, Canaan. These 2.5 tribes, I'm saying this over and over again to make a point, they're remaining there because it worked well for them. They had much cattle, and it was a place for cattle. The other 9.5 tribes are going over because God says, this is your land, this is the promised land. It will be divided amongst you for an inheritance. And they said, okay, we'll go. And they went. Guess which side of the river the Ark of the Covenant was on? It was on the west side. It went with them across the Jordan. Remember the priest stepping into the water, stopping the flow? That was what stopped the flow of the Jordan. In other words, the Ark of the Covenant, now I understand we're living in church age now, and the Holy Spirit indwells the believer. But I want us to make a point. When they crossed over, the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized and literally was the presence of God, went to the promised land. They could stay over here and worship God, but it's going to be different without His presence. The altar that they're going to construct is going to be they use this word, a replica altar. It's not going to be the original. They're going to construct something that's going to look like, they're going to honor it in the same way, they're going to bless and worship God through this, but really this is not the ark. It's a replica. Here's the thing about it. Most people want to live our life. Most children of God want to live our life on the edge of God's will versus the center of God's will. You know what the majority of churches need around the globe? The majority of gospel preaching churches, let me just conclude that. People that live according to the gospel. We need people in our local churches with convictions.
That's right.
Not convenience.
Amen. That's right.
Big difference. Most people live and worship the Lord out of convenience. In other words, as long as nothing else is going on that I feel is super important, then you got me, Lord. And on days when something is going on super important, we say, Lord, well, you know this is going on, and you know what I'm going through, and we kind of try to excuse our behavior. We get over here on the edge instead of getting over here in the center. And the reality of it is, we'll spend a whole lot of people spend their entire life living on the edge. Let me ask a question. Were the 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, were they still part of the tribes of Israel? Sure they were. Were they still part of the chosen generation? Sure they were. But they never crossed the Jordan. Here's the thing. The application I'm trying to make tonight is this. We need churches, we need Christians in churches that we determine to live by conviction. We need to have conviction in our life so that we have an influence on people. One thing we talked about Monday night at our class Monday night was the only way to influence people is to be different. If you're like them, you have no influence over them. I mean, really. The only way that we're ever going to influence anybody is if we're different than them. We cannot influence anybody if we're just like them. What's the influence? Influence comes when there's a difference. The Bible says the Lord calls us out. The New Testament tells us He calls us to be a peculiar people. That doesn't mean strange. We might be strange, but that's not what it means. It means different, unique. There's traits that should be seen in the Christian that are not seen in the average person.
That's right. Amen.
Our response on the job should be different than it is for the average person. I know there's some people that are very diligent on the job, but they should be more diligent than a Christian. Really. They may be as diligent, but they should be more diligent. We should be the example. There should be something about us that has a difference that people see in us. And it's not because we have the power to make that change. It's because we're trusting God to make that change in us. Because every one of our flesh is so similar to the fact that none of us are strong. We're all weak. But in our weakness is where God shows His strength. And in our sorrow is where we find that comfort, and in difficulties is where we find that moving of the Holy Spirit and that victory in the times of difficulty and trials. And what it boils down to is our life should be a life where we say, I'm going to be separated. And just like we talked about to start this whole study off, God opened the Jordan, opened the Red Sea to get the children out of Israel, right? Out of Egypt, out of Egypt. And you got to say these things louder so I can hear it, all right? And to get them out of Egypt, God opened the Red Sea, part of the Red Sea, to get them out of Egypt. And Egypt, every time in the Bible, Egypt is always a picture of the world. Always a picture of the world. So He said, I don't want you to go back in the world. He closed the Red Sea and said, you're never going to go back. I don't want you to ever go back. I'm not going to make it easier for you to go back into the world. There will have to be some suffering if you go back into the world. Because I'm not opening it up for you again. But then he entered the promised land. He entered the 40 years of wandering. And his 40 years of wandering, we find that there's a generation that has to die out because, and we talked about that a couple times ago, about the fact that they were faithless and they didn't want to believe God. And God said, no, from every man from 20 years and upward is going to die, and they're not going to enter. And so they had to spend some time in the wilderness wandering around. And they were never really wandering like, where are we going to go next? God was always leading them. We call it wandering years, but God was always leading them. Just because they didn't know what was next, don't mean that God didn't. They had a cloud and a fire to follow. They knew where to go. They just followed the cloud and followed the fire, Because guess where the food's going to be? It's going to be where the cloud is and where the fire's at. Right? Guess where the water's going to be? It's going to be where the cloud is and where the fire's at. And it's not going to be anywhere else. God's only going to provide as we follow Him. So they find this out. And sure enough, they die off. And that's what we come to there at the end of, the beginning of the book of Joshua, where Moses now is dead and Joshua's now being given the responsibility of leading the children of Israel across the Jordan. So 9.5 tribes cross. 2.5 tribes don't. And they're noble men. They're honest men. And they say, we'll go and fight with you. But after the battles, can we come back? And Moses said, sure. The agreement is you're not going to do nothing. You have to fight for us and with us. You're part of the family. So they did. But they came back and went back across the Jordan River. And they camped in the land that God may have delivered at that time to them because they were passing through. Here's the question. We're going to conclude very, very quickly tonight. I'm going to ask you this question. I want between now and Sunday night, I want somebody, maybe all of you, be wonderful. Somebody find these 2.5 tribes, these 3 tribes represented, and tell me what become of them, what did God use them to do, or give me some detail about what happens to them. Now, you can do that with all 12 tribes if you want. But we're talking about these 3 tribes exclusively. I'm going to bring you some details of all 12 tribes tonight, and I'm going to share with you. But I want you to give me some detail. I want you to find about these 2.5 tribes that remained there on the east side of the Jordan. Because here's the application I'm trying to make tonight. We can be as good a person, as moral a person, as hard-working person. We can fight for everybody else and help them do right. And that's what they did. They took care of their family. They built cities and gated walls and protected their children and their wives. They provided for them. And in fact, they had much cattle. And there was land for cattle. So they lived in a great place that met their needs. And they're great people. They're the average church members. They're great people. But they was on the edge. They wasn't in the world, but they wasn't in victory either. They was on the edge of victory. But here's the thing I want to point out. When you camp on the edge of victory, the enemy still has access to you. On the other side of Jordan, the enemy didn't have access to them. Because God said, if you cross the Jordan, you enter the promised land, the land of promise. I'm going to give you victory over the kings and the kingdoms, but you got to be obedient in that. And we understand they didn't always do that, and therefore they had problems. But the idea being there, God gave them that land, and it's theirs today, by the way. Geographically, it's still theirs. And He gave them that land. And they did cross over, and God gave amazing victories in Jericho. And as the Battle of Jericho, we have Rahab. We have a story of her family being saved. And then because of that, we have Rahab and her son being Boaz. We talked about that on Sunday, and about how Boaz become the one that married Ruth. And we have amazing stories how people entered into the very bloodline of Christ. But the reality of it is there were still 2.5 tribes of people that never entered that land. And here's where we find ourselves. Right on the edge of victory. And we say, what's the big deal? I'm better off than I've ever been. I go to church more than I've ever gone. I read my Bible more regularly than I've ever read it. I'm a lot better person. I work a lot harder. I try to help other people. I try to meet their needs. I try to provide for them. I try to befriend a lot of people. And we just find ourselves just like them. We find ourselves right there. Oh, you need some help? I'll go fight for you. I'll battle. I'll fight for you. Well, hey, but we just never get over it. The Jordan River pictures a victorious Christian life, crossing over into the promised land, the land of promise. It's a victorious Christian life. Some people say, well, it's like entering into heaven. I don't really agree with that analogy, only because there's still battles to be won over there, and there's not even battles to be won in heaven. They've all been won, you know. So I believe that I cling to the view that it's more of a picture of a victorious Christian life.
That's right. Amen.
That we live there by faith. We got there by faith.
Amen.
We live there by faith. And every time we exercise faith in our life, God gives a victory.
That's right.
And every time we're obedient, we find God's blessings. So between now and tonight, take a few minutes. With computers, it probably won't take you more than that time. I'm not good at computers, so I'm asking you to do it. Take books, computers, whatever. And tell me what happened to these 2.5 tribes of people. Tell me something, give me some detail about what happened in their future. Now let me ask a question real quick. I'm going to give you a little starting point. They're never done away with. Because guess what? During tribulation, God's sending back 12,000 from every tribe. So they're not annihilated. They're still there. God didn't disown them, just like He don't disown any of His children these days. They're still there. But I want you to find me something out. And I'll bring you some things about the other tribes as well and share with those. I might even make some photocopies and hand them out of some things. But I want you to think about this. When we live our life in this world, right here, God said, I want you to come on over. Come on over. I'll stop the trials that you're facing. I'll block them off for you. Just cross over. They're not going to go away. It's still going to be there, but I'll stop it for long enough for you to get over here. And you know, the devil says, you can't do that. Look around. Look how good you've got it. Look at your job. Look at your family. If you do that, if you start taking that stand, your family's going to they're not going to be as close to you. If you take that stand, will you be able to keep your job if you take that stand? Well, if you take, the devil's going to throw tons of things at us to keep us on the edge. Because every step we take is more towards victory. And you know what? I'm telling you, I've seen it happen in my life. I wish I had complete victory of everything, but I'm just like you. My flesh is just like yours. But every time in my life, God said, Lord, I'm going to do that. And I just do it. That trouble the devil kept throwing in my face, your friends, your family, your job, your income, your whatever, the grass, the cattle, you know, all those things that we look at, it's like God completely, you know, seen and heard no evil, you know. It's like when I decided to follow the Lord and do that, I didn't even give a thought to those things.
That's right. Amen. That's right.
And then when I got over there, you know what I found out? Almost exclusively every single time, the battles wasn't there that I thought were going to be there.
That's right. Amen.
It was me that kept me from getting victory. It was my fear. It was my foolishness. It was my lack of faith. And here we have people that's camped out on the side of the Jordan, the east side, which is the side where the lack of faith was buried. Were those that didn't have the faith to go over, and they're remaining there. Now, they're not part of the generation that's supposed to die off. Their generation is supposed to cross over. But when they got to the point of crossing over, they said, you know, life's pretty good. Our tribes have cattle. This is a good place for cattle. And the world does that to us today. I'm telling you, the devil does lots of things, lots of things. You say, what do you mean? You think the devil would actually let somebody get a promotion to keep them from serving the Lord? I absolutely do, because he's the prince and the power of the air.
That's right. Amen.
Read Ephesians chapter 6. He works in those places of power.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do believe that he'll open up doors for the saved to go through to make it look like that's a victory, when really, because we didn't pray about it, because it's an opportunity we've been waiting on our whole life for. If we just prayed about it, God would have said, yeah, why don't you just come on over where I'm at? I have way more for you than you'll have if you stay here. And the devil does it. So I want you to do that. It's your homework assignment. How's that? I don't give those out very often. I'm giving you a homework assignment. Here's the last thing. This is what I wanted Rebecca to go get for me, along with my glasses.